Black mechanic's daughter fixes a flat tire for stranger unaware he's a millionaire falling for her. The Georgia sun beat down mercilessly on the asphalt, creating shimmering waves of heat that made the highway look like it was dancing. Sierra Carter squinted through her windshield, the ancient air conditioning in her father's delivery truck wheezing out air that was barely cooler than the inferno outside. She was already running late with the brake pad delivery to Murphy's garage across town, and the last thing she needed was another delay. That's when she saw it. A sleek, midnight blue sports car sat tilted on the shoulder like a wounded animal, its hazard lights blinking desperately. Even from a distance, Sierra could tell it was expensive, the kind of car that cost more than her family's house. As she drew closer, she could make out the Maserati badge gleaming in the sunlight. "Daddy always said never pass someone in trouble," she muttered, pulling her battered pickup behind the luxury vehicle. A man stood beside the car, and Sierra had to do a double take. He looked like he'd stepped off the pages of a magazine, crisp white shirt rolled up at the sleeves, dark slacks that probably cost more than she made in a month, and shoes that had never seen a day of honest work. His thick, dark hair was slightly disheveled, and sweat beaded on his forehead as he stared at the flat rear tire like it was some unsolvable puzzle. "Need some help?" Sierra called out, hopping down from her truck. The man looked up, and Sierra felt something flutter in her chest. His eyes were a warm brown, and when he smiled, it was genuine, not the polished, fake smile she'd expected from someone driving a car like that. "I hate to admit this," he said, running a hand through his hair, "but I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing here. I mean, I know it's flat, but beyond that." He gestured helplessly at the tire. Sierra walked around the Maserati, her trained eye taking in more than just the obvious flat. "When did you first notice something was wrong?" "About 10 miles back. The car started pulling to the right, and then I heard this flapping sound." He watched as Sierra crouched beside the wheel, her worn work boots a stark contrast to the pristine vehicle. "I'm Jason, by the way. Jason King. Sierra Carter." She ran her fingers along the tire, finding the nail that had punctured it. "Well, Jason King, you've got a nail right here, but that's not your biggest problem." Jason's eyebrows shot up. "It's not." Sierra stood, wiping her hands on the rag she kept in her back pocket. "Mind if I take a look under the hood? You know about cars?" There was no condescension in his voice, just genuine curiosity. "My daddy owns Carter's Auto Repair. I've been around engines since I could walk." Sierra popped the hood and immediately spotted what she was looking for. "Just as I thought. See this brake fluid leak here? And the way your brake pads are worn? You're about 200 miles away from complete brake failure." Jason leaned in, following her pointing finger. Up close, Sierra caught a whiff of his cologne, something expensive and subtle that made her stomach do unexpected somersaults. "I had the car serviced just last month," Jason said, frowning. "Well, somebody didn't do their job right." Sierra grabbed her jack from the truck. "You're lucky this happened here and not on I-285 in rush hour traffic." "You're going to change it?" Jason asked, incredulous. Sierra was already loosening the lug nuts. "Unless you'd rather wait 3 hours for AAA in this heat." Jason watched in fascination as Sierra worked with the efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Her movements were precise, confident. She had the flat off and the spare on in less than 15 minutes, her dark skin glistening with a light sheen of sweat. "There's a technique to fixing that brake issue," Sierra said, lowering the jack. "Most mechanics will tell you to replace the whole system, but if you adjust the brake shoe tension and replace just the master cylinder, you'll save about $800 and get better performance." Jason stared at her. "I've never heard of that approach." "It's an old-school trick my granddaddy taught my daddy. Works better than the fancy computer diagnostics they use at those high-end shops." Sierra tossed her tools back into the truck. "Just make sure whoever you take it to knows what they're doing." "How much do I owe you?" Jason reached for his wallet. "Nothing. Just helping out a fellow human being." Sierra climbed back into her truck, then paused. "But get those brakes looked at soon. That brake fluid leak won't wait. Wait, Jason called out as she started the engine. At least let me get your number. You know, in case I need a good mechanic recommendation. Sierra hesitated. Everything about this man screamed money and privilege, two things that had never brought anything but trouble to her family. But there was something in his eyes, something that seemed genuine. 404-555-0147, she said finally. Jason typed it into his phone. Sierra Carter, Automotive Angel. Despite herself, Sierra smiled. Just Sierra's fine. As she pulled back onto the highway, Sierra glanced in her rearview mirror. Jason was still standing beside his car, watching her drive away. She shook her head, trying to dismiss the warm feeling spreading through her chest. Men like that didn't exist in her world for more than a few minutes on a hot highway. What she didn't see was Jason pulling out his phone and making a call the moment her truck disappeared around the bend. Marcus? It's Jason. I need you to look into someone for me. Sierra Carter, Carter's Auto Repair. He paused, watching the spot where her truck had vanished. And Marcus? I want to know everything. 20 minutes later, Sierra pulled into Murphy's garage, still thinking about the encounter. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Thank you again. You were right about everything. Jay. She stared at the message, wondering how he'd gotten her number to text when she'd only given it to him for calls. Then she remembered, he'd typed it directly into his phone. Smartphones could do both, couldn't they? Sierra shrugged and headed into Murphy's to deliver the brake pads, unaware that across town, Jason King was sitting in a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows, staring at a comprehensive background report on her family's struggling auto shop. And for the first time in years, Jason King was smiling, not the practiced smile he used in board meetings, but the real thing. The kind of smile that meant he'd found something worth pursuing. Something told him Sierra Carter was going to change everything. 1 week later, Sierra was elbow-deep in the engine of a 1995 Honda Civic when her phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize, and she almost let it go to voicemail. But business had been so slow lately that every call could mean the difference between keeping the lights on or closing the shop. Carter's Auto Repair, this is Sierra. She answered, tucking the phone between her ear and shoulder as she continued working. Hello, is this Sierra Carter? The voice was professional, crisp, the kind of voice that belonged in an office building, not calling a small neighborhood garage. That's me. What can I do for you? My name is Rebecca Torres from King Automotive. We heard about your work, and we'd like you to come in for an interview. Sierra nearly dropped her wrench. King Automotive was the luxury dealership uptown, the place with the glass showroom and cars that cost more than most people's houses. She'd driven past it plenty of times, but never imagined she'd have any reason to go inside. I think you might have the wrong number, Sierra said slowly. I work at a small neighborhood shop. We don't exactly move in luxury car circles. No mistake. We specifically asked for Sierra Carter from Carter's Auto Repair. Would you be available to come in tomorrow afternoon? Say 2 o'clock? Sierra looked around the garage. Her father was in the office, hunched over bills they couldn't pay. The service bay that should have been full of cars waiting for repair held only the Honda and an old Buick that belonged to Mrs. Peterson from down the street. Her little brother Marcus had called last night, worried about his tuition payment being late again. I'll be there, she heard herself saying. The next afternoon, Sierra stood outside King Automotive, feeling completely out of place. She'd worn her best jeans and a clean button-down shirt, but she still felt like she was wearing a costume. The building was all glass and chrome, with luxury cars displayed like pieces of art. Taking a deep breath, she pushed through the heavy glass doors. The showroom was even more intimidating on the inside. Polished marble floors, soft jazz playing overhead, and salespeople in expensive suits gliding between customers who looked like they belonged in country clubs. You must be Sierra Carter. A woman with perfectly styled blonde hair and a warm smile approached her. I'm Rebecca Torres, we spoke on the phone. Thank you so much for coming. Rebecca led her through the showroom and down a hallway lined with offices. Sierra caught glimpses of people in business attire talking on phones and typing on computers. This was a different world entirely. "The position we're considering you for is unique," Rebecca explained as they walked. "We're looking for someone with exceptional diagnostic skills to work directly with our clients and their vehicles. Someone who can identify problems that others might miss." They entered a conference room with a long table and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the service bays below. Sierra could see mechanics in crisp uniforms working on cars that probably cost more than her family made in 5 years. "Can I ask how you heard about me?" Sierra said, settling into the leather chair Rebecca indicated. "We have our ways of finding talent," Rebecca said with a mysterious smile. "Sometimes the best mechanics aren't the ones with the fanciest certifications." The interview was going better than Sierra had expected when the conference room door opened. Her heart nearly stopped when she saw who walked in. "Sorry I'm late," Jason King said, straightening his tie as he entered the room. He looked just as polished as he had on the highway, but now Sierra understood why. This wasn't just any employee. This was Jason King, as in King Automotive. "You two know each other?" Rebecca asked, looking between them with obvious confusion. "We've met," Jason said, his eyes never leaving Sierra's face. "Ms. Carter helped me out of a difficult situation last week." Sierra felt her cheeks burn. The roadside encounter suddenly took on a completely different meaning. Had this entire interview been orchestrated? Had he been testing her somehow? "Mr. King owns the dealership," Rebecca explained, though Sierra had already figured that out. Jason took a seat across from Sierra, and she noticed he seemed almost nervous, a stark contrast to the confident businessman she'd expected. "I have a proposition," Jason said. "A probationary trial. 1 week working here, full access to our tools and equipment, working directly with our clients. If it works out, we'll discuss a permanent position." Sierra's mind raced. This had to be some kind of setup. Men like Jason King didn't just offer high-paying jobs to small-town mechanics they met on the side of the road. "What's the catch?" she asked bluntly. Jason's smile was genuine, the same one she remembered from the highway. "No catch. Just a chance for both of us to see if this is a good fit." Sierra thought about her father's worried face as he'd gone through the bills that morning. She thought about Marcus calling to say his scholarship might be revoked if the tuition wasn't paid soon. She thought about the empty service bays and the customers who'd started taking their cars to the chain shop across town. "When would I start?" she asked. "Monday morning if you're interested." Sierra looked out the window at the busy service bays, then back at Jason. Something in his expression made her want to trust him, but her instincts told her this was too good to be true. "I'll do it," she said finally. "But I'm keeping my guard up." Jason's smile widened. "I wouldn't expect anything less from the woman who diagnosed brake problems in 5 minutes on the side of the highway." As Sierra left the dealership that afternoon, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into something much more complicated than a simple job opportunity. But with her family's financial situation growing more desperate by the day, she didn't have much choice. What she didn't know was that Jason had spent the entire week since their meeting thinking about her, not just her mechanical skills, but the way she'd helped a stranger without expecting anything in return. And now, watching her walk to her truck through his office window, he wondered if he was making a mistake that could cost him everything. Because Jason King had a secret that could destroy everything Sierra was about to discover. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made Sierra feel optimistic despite her reservations. She pulled into the employee parking lot of King Automotive at exactly 7:45 a.m., 15 minutes early as her father had always taught her. The dealership looked different in the morning light, less intimidating, more like a place where honest work might actually happen. Rebecca met her at the employee entrance with a genuine smile and a steaming cup of coffee. "Ready for your first day?" Sierra nodded, though her stomach churned with nervous energy. "As ready as I'll ever be." The service bay was impressive, cleaner and better equipped than any shop Sierra had ever seen. Hydraulic lifts gleamed under bright LED lights, and tool chests that probably cost more than her truck lined the walls. She counted at least 20 service bays, each one equipped with diagnostic computers that looked like they belonged on a spaceship. "You'll be working with Travis Martinez," Rebecca said, leading her toward a tall man with graying temples who was bent over the engine of a silver Mercedes. "He's our head mechanic. Travis, meet Sierra Carter." Travis looked up and Sierra immediately noticed something in his eyes that made her uncomfortable. His smile was too wide, too practiced, the kind of smile that didn't reach the eyes. "So you're the miracle worker Jason found," Travis said, wiping his hands on a pristine shop rag. "Heard you can spot problems other mechanics miss." "I just pay attention to what the car is telling me," Sierra replied modestly. "Well, let's see what you think about this one." Travis gestured to the Mercedes. "Customer says it's making a strange noise when she brakes. I was about to recommend a complete brake system overhaul. Rotors, pads, calipers, the works. About $3,500. Sierra leaned over the engine, then walked around to examine the wheels. She crouched down and ran her fingers along the brake components, listening carefully as Travis demonstrated the noise by pressing the brake pedal. "It's just glazed brake pads," she said after a few minutes. "Probably from sitting too long without being driven. $20 fix, maybe $30 with labor." Travis's smile flickered. "Are you sure? That noise sounds pretty serious to me." "Positive. See how the pad surface has this shiny look? That's glazing. You can fix it by roughing up the surface with sandpaper, or just replace the pads if the customer wants peace of mind." "Huh." Travis made a note on his clipboard. "I'll take that under consideration." Over the next few days, Sierra began to notice patterns that made her increasingly uncomfortable. Expensive repairs that didn't match the actual problems. Customers who seemed agitated and confused after what should have been routine checkups. Parts that looked suspiciously new being labeled as worn out and needing replacement. On Wednesday, she watched Travis work on a BMW whose owner had come in for an oil change. While the customer waited in the lobby, Travis carefully loosened a belt until it was barely hanging on, then called the customer over. "Ma'am, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but your serpentine belt is about to fail completely. If this breaks while you're driving, you could lose power steering, air conditioning, everything. We're talking potential engine damage." The woman, who looked to be in her 70s, wrung her hands nervously. "How much would it cost to fix?" "Well, it's not just the belt. When they stretch like this, it usually means the tensioner is going bad too. And if we're in there, we should probably check the water pump." Travis rattled off a list of repairs using technical terms that clearly confused the customer. All told, about $1,200. Sierra felt sick. That belt had been fine when the car came in. She'd specifically looked at it during her initial inspection. After the customer agreed to the work, Sierra cornered Travis by the parts counter. "That belt wasn't stretched when she brought the car in." Travis looked around to make sure no one was listening, then leaned closer. "Look, sweetheart, this is how business works in the real world. These people have money to burn, and we're just making sure they spend it on preventive maintenance." "That's not preventive maintenance, that's fraud." "That's a strong word." Travis's friendly demeanor vanished. "Maybe you should focus on doing your job and let me worry about mine." That afternoon, Sierra found herself alone in Jason's office, having been called up to discuss her first week's performance. The office was spacious and elegant, with awards and photos covering one wall. She noticed a picture of Jason with what looked like his family, an older couple who shared his warm eyes. "How are you settling in?" Jason asked, settling behind his desk. Sierra took a deep breath. "I need to talk to you about some things I've observed." She explained what she'd witnessed, the inflated estimates, the unnecessary repairs, the way Travis had manipulated that morning's customer. Jason listened without interruption, his expression unreadable. When she finished, Jason leaned back in his chair and sighed. "Sierra, I appreciate your thoroughness. But you have to understand, this is how big business works. Our overhead is enormous, this building, the equipment, the staff. We have to make money somehow. Sierra stared at him. By lying to customers? By maximizing revenue opportunities? Jason's voice was calm, businesslike. These people can afford it. They're not struggling to pay rent or put food on the table. What's $1,200 to someone driving a $60,000 car? It's still wrong. Jason studied her for a long moment. Is it? Or is it just different from what you're used to in your father's shop? Sierra felt something cold settle in her stomach. This wasn't the man who'd stood helplessly beside his broken-down car, grateful for her assistance. This was someone else entirely, someone who saw customers as profit margins instead of people. I see, she said quietly. I hope you do. Jason's smile returned, but now it looked as calculating as Travis's. Because if you want to stay here, you'll need to learn to play the game. That evening, Sierra sat in her truck in the dealership parking lot, staring at the building through tear-blurred eyes. She'd been so desperate for the job, so hopeful that it might solve her family's problems, that she'd ignored her instincts about it being too good to be true. But as she started her truck and drove home, Sierra made a decision. If Jason King thought she was going to quietly participate in cheating innocent people, he was about to discover just how wrong he could be. What she didn't know was that Jason was watching her from his office window, and the expression on his face wasn't victorious, it was hopeful. The game was just beginning. For the next 2 weeks, Sierra played along while quietly documenting everything. She carried a small notebook tucked inside her work shirt, jotting down license plates, repair estimates, and Travis's fraudulent diagnoses. Every inflated bill, every unnecessary part replacement, every confused customer, she recorded it all. She told herself she was gathering evidence, but the truth was more complicated. Part of her still hoped Jason might be testing her somehow, waiting to see if she'd do the right thing. The man who'd stood helplessly beside his broken Maserati seemed so different from the cold businessman who'd dismissed her concerns about cheating customers. That hope died on a rainy Thursday morning in November. Sierra arrived at work to find Travis grinning like he'd won the lottery. Got a big fish coming in today, he announced to the other mechanics. Mercedes S-Class, practically brand new. Owner's some hotshot attorney who doesn't know a spark plug from a tailpipe. The car arrived at 10 a.m., driven by a well-dressed woman in her 40s who looked frazzled and pressed for time. I just need the brakes checked, she told Travis. They've been making a grinding noise. Sierra watched from across the bay as Travis performed his usual inspection. But this time, something went wrong. While demonstrating the brake problem to the customer, Travis's face went pale. He quickly ushered the woman back to the waiting area and signaled for Sierra to join him. We've got a problem, he whispered urgently. The brake pads are completely shot, metal on metal. This car is a death trap. Sierra looked at the brake assembly and felt her blood run cold. The pads were worn down to nothing, the rotors were scarred and warped, and brake fluid was leaking from multiple points. This wasn't routine maintenance. This was a genuine emergency. How long has it been making that noise? Sierra asked. She says about a week, but looking at this wear pattern, it's been going on for months. Someone's been ignoring this problem for a long time. They performed the repairs quickly and thoroughly, replacing pads, rotors, and brake lines. It was expensive but necessary work. When Travis presented the bill to the customer, she was grateful rather than suspicious. Thank God you caught this, she said, signing the credit card receipt. I drive my teenage daughter in this car every day. Sierra felt a moment of relief. Maybe she'd been wrong about Travis. Maybe the other incidents had been misunderstandings or... Make sure you initial the work order, Travis said to Sierra as the customer left. Standard procedure. Sierra glanced at the clipboard and froze. Her initials were already there, written in Travis's handwriting. But according to the work order, the repair had been completed 3 days ago, before the customer had even brought the car in. What is this? She demanded, pointing to the forged signature. Travis shrugged. Insurance. Sometimes customers come back with complaints, and it helps to have documentation that the work was done properly. But I didn't do any work on this car 3 days ago. I wasn't even here. I was sick with the flu. Details, Travis said dismissively. The work got done, that's what matters. Sierra stared at the forged initials, feeling something crack inside her chest. This is forgery. If something happens to that car, if the brakes fail again, I'll be liable. My name is on this. Nothing's going to happen. We did good work. But what if it does? What if there's an accident? Travis's expression hardened. Then you better hope our insurance is good. That afternoon, Sierra marched into Jason's office without knocking. He looked up from his computer, startled by her sudden entrance. We need to talk, she said, slamming the forged work order on his desk. Jason examined the document, his expression unreadable. What am I looking at? Travis forged my signature on a repair I never made. If that car has brake problems again, I'm legally responsible. This isn't just about overcharging customers anymore. This is about liability, about safety, about business. Jason interrupted calmly. Travis was protecting the company. If a customer claims we didn't do the work properly, having your signature provides documentation. Sierra couldn't believe what she was hearing. Are you listening to yourself? He forged my name on a legal document. Jason stood up and walked to the window overlooking the service bay. Sierra, you're still thinking like someone who works in a small neighborhood garage. This is corporate automotive. There are protocols, procedures, ways of doing things that might seem unusual to you. There's nothing unusual about fraud and forgery. It's illegal. Jason turned back to her, and for a moment, Sierra thought she saw something flicker in his eyes. Regret, maybe, or guilt. But it was gone so quickly she might have imagined it. If you want to stay here, he said quietly, you'll need to learn to play the game. This is how business works at this level. Sierra picked up the work order and stared at her forged signature. 3 weeks ago, she'd been desperate enough to take any job that might help her family. Now she was staring at evidence that could destroy her reputation and potentially make her liable for someone's death. And if I don't want to play the game? Jason's smile was cold. Then you know where the door is. Sierra walked out of his office feeling like she'd been punched in the stomach. The man she'd helped on the highway, the one who'd seemed genuinely grateful and kind, had been an illusion. The real Jason King was sitting in that office, willing to let his employees commit fraud and forgery as long as it protected his bottom line. But as she gathered her tools and prepared to clean out her locker, Sierra noticed something that made her pause. In the back corner of the service bay, partially hidden behind a stack of tires, was a locked metal cabinet she'd never seen opened. Travis had the only key, and he guarded it carefully. Sierra glanced around to make sure no one was watching, then approached the cabinet. Through a small gap in the door, she could see folders, documents, and what looked like a small video camera. Her pulse quickened. Whatever was in that cabinet, Travis didn't want anyone to see it. And if her instincts were right, it might be the evidence she needed to expose everything. Sierra made her decision. She wasn't going to quit, not yet. If Jason King thought he could intimidate her into silence, he was about to learn that he'd picked the wrong woman to mess with. But first, she needed to find out what secrets were locked away in that cabinet. Sierra spent the weekend researching lockpicking tutorials on YouTube and practicing with the old padlocks in her father's garage. She told herself she was doing this for all the customers who'd been cheated, for the elderly woman who'd paid $1,200 for unnecessary repairs, for everyone who trusted mechanics to be honest. But deep down, she knew she was also doing it for herself, to prove that the man who'd seemed so genuine on the highway hadn't been completely fake. Monday morning arrived gray and drizzling. Sierra waited until Travis left for his lunch break, then made her move. Her hands shook as she worked the improvised lockpicks into the cabinet's mechanism. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, she heard the satisfying click of the lock opening. Inside, her worst fears were confirmed. Folders full of altered invoices showed the real scope of the operation. Customers billed for premium parts but receiving cheap knockoffs. Work orders for repairs that were never performed. Photos of deliberately damaged components taken after customers had already paid for fixes. And most damning of all, a small digital camera that had been recording customer interactions in the service bay. Sierra's hands trembled as she flipped through video files on the camera's memory card. There was Travis loosening belts, Travis swapping new parts for used ones, Travis coaching other mechanics on how to inflate estimates. It was a systematic operation that had been going on for years. At the bottom of the cabinet, she found something that made her blood run cold, a folder labeled Insurance Claims. Inside were copies of accident reports where brake failures and mechanical problems had resulted in crashes. Problems that had occurred after repairs at King Automotive. Problems that should have been covered by the warranty but were instead blamed on driver error or normal wear and tear. People had been hurt, and the dealership had covered it up. Sierra photographed everything with her phone, her heart pounding so hard she could barely hold the device steady. She was so focused on documenting the evidence that she almost missed the sound of footsteps approaching. Find anything interesting? Sierra spun around to find Jason standing behind her, his expression unreadable. She'd been so absorbed in the evidence that she hadn't heard him return from lunch early. This is... She gestured helplessly at the open cabinet. This is criminal. People have been hurt because of this. I know, Jason said quietly. Sierra stared at him. You know? You know and you let it continue? Jason walked closer, and Sierra noticed he didn't seem surprised or angry about her breaking into the cabinet. If anything, he looked relieved. Sierra, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Can you do that? Something in his tone made her pause. This wasn't the cold businessman who dismissed her concerns. This was someone else entirely. Someone who looked tired and stressed and maybe even a little scared. I'm listening, she said cautiously. Jason glanced toward the service bay, then stepped closer to the cabinet. 6 months ago, I inherited this dealership from my uncle. The business was successful, profitable, everything looked perfect on paper. But I started noticing the same things you noticed: angry customers, complaints that didn't make sense, repair bills that seemed excessive. So you knew about the fraud? I suspected. But suspecting and proving are two different things. My uncle's old employees, especially Travis, had been with the company for years. They knew where all the bodies were buried, if you know what I mean. When I tried to investigate, they closed ranks. Told me I was inexperienced, that I didn't understand how the automotive business worked. Sierra felt a flicker of the hope she'd been trying to suppress. So what changed? You did. Jason's eyes met hers. That day on the highway, when you stopped to help me. I'd been driving around with those brake problems for weeks. 3 different mechanics, including Travis, had told me the car was fine. But you diagnosed the real problem in 5 minutes. You set this up, Sierra said, understanding flooding through her. The job offer everything. You were testing me. I was testing everyone, Jason corrected. I needed someone I could trust, someone with the skills to spot what was really happening and the integrity to do something about it. I've been watching you document everything, waiting to see what you'd do. Sierra gestured to the cabinet. Did you know about this specific evidence? I suspected Travis was keeping records, but I could never get access. You just found more evidence in 10 minutes than I'd uncovered in 6 months of trying. Why didn't you just fire him? Clean house? Jason's laugh was bitter. Because I'm a 28-year-old business school graduate trying to run a dealership in an industry I barely understood. Travis and his crew could have destroyed me with wrongful termination lawsuits, or worse, exposed problems from before I took over that could have landed me in jail for things I didn't even know about. Sierra stared at the evidence spread around them. So what happens now? Now we finish this properly. Jason pulled out his own phone and began photographing the evidence. I've been in contact with the state attorney general's office for months, but I needed ironclad proof before I could move. This is exactly what they'd been waiting for. And Travis? Will be fired today, along with anyone else involved. Jason paused in his photographing. I should have done this months ago, Sierra. But I was scared of destroying the business, of putting innocent employees out of work, of failing. Sierra looked at Jason, really looked at him, and saw the man she'd met on the highway. Vulnerable, grateful, and trying to do the right thing even when it was difficult. "There's something else," Jason said, pulling out a small digital recorder. "I've been recording my conversations with Travis and the others for weeks, including their attempts to pressure you into going along with the fraud." "You recorded our conversations too?" Jason nodded, looking guilty. "Including the ones where I pretended to go along with their methods. I'm sorry about that, Sierra. I hated every word I said to you, but I needed them to believe I was on their side." Sierra felt something shift in her chest, not quite forgiveness, but understanding. "You could have told me. I couldn't risk it. If Travis suspected I was investigating, he could have destroyed evidence or disappeared entirely. I needed you to react naturally, to document everything without knowing you were part of a larger investigation." Voices echoed from the service bay as the other mechanics returned from lunch. Jason quickly began closing the cabinet. "What happens now?" Sierra asked. Jason's smile was the same genuine one she remembered from the highway. "Now we call the authorities. And then we rebuild this place the right way. We? If you're interested. I meant what I said about wanting you as my head of technical operations. Just, under very different circumstances than you thought." Sierra looked around at the evidence of corruption, then back at Jason. For the first time in weeks, she felt like she could trust her instincts again. "Let's finish this," she said. The next morning, King Automotive looked like a crime scene. State investigators moved through the service bays with cameras and evidence bags while Travis Martinez was led away in handcuffs, his face a mask of disbelief and rage. 2 other mechanics who'd been part of the scheme followed behind him, their heads down as local news cameras captured their walk of shame. Sierra stood beside Jason in his office, watching the aftermath through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The weight of the past few weeks pressed down on her shoulders, the stress of documenting the fraud, the betrayal she'd felt when she thought Jason was part of it, and now the surreal relief of knowing she'd been right to trust her instincts about him. "Any regrets?" Jason asked quietly. "About exposing Travis?" "None." Sierra turned away from the window. "About trusting you?" "I'm still deciding." Jason nodded, understanding the distance in her voice. "I know I hurt you. Making you think I was part of it, letting you believe I was willing to cheat customers. I can explain it, but I can't take it back." The office door opened and Rebecca Torres entered, followed by a woman Sierra didn't recognize, someone in an expensive suit who carried herself with the confidence of authority. "Sierra Carter, this is District Attorney Sandra Reeves," Rebecca said. "She'd like to speak with you about testifying in the case against Travis and his associates." The DA was businesslike but kind, explaining that Sierra's documentation and testimony would be crucial in securing convictions. "What you did took incredible courage," she told Sierra. "Most people would have just walked away. Most people don't have a family business being strangled by competition from places like this," Sierra replied. "I couldn't let them keep cheating people." After the DA left, Jason called an all-hands meeting in the showroom. The remaining employees, about half the original staff, gathered nervously among the luxury cars. Some looked scared, others angry, all of them uncertain about their futures. "I know the past few days have been difficult," Jason began. "And I know some of you are wondering whether you'll still have jobs. The answer is yes if you want them. But we're going to do things differently from now on." He outlined his vision: transparent pricing, honest diagnostics, customer education instead of confusion. No more inflated estimates, no more unnecessary repairs, no more treating customers like walking ATM machines. "Some of you might not like these changes," Jason continued. "If you're more comfortable with the old way of doing business, I'll provide excellent references and help you find positions elsewhere. But if you want to help build something better, something we can all be proud of, then I want you to stay." Most of the employees stayed. A few didn't, and Sierra respected their honesty in leaving rather than pretending to embrace changes they couldn't accept. Jason turned to Sierra as the meeting concluded. I have a proposition for you. Lead mechanic and technical supervisor, with profit sharing and full authority over diagnostic procedures and repair recommendations. Sierra felt her heart race, but she forced herself to think practically. What about my father's shop? I can't just abandon him. Jason's smile was the same genuine one she remembered from the highway. I was hoping you'd say that. I've been thinking about expanding our community outreach. What if we invested in restoring Carter's Auto Repair as a satellite location? Same honest practices, same high standards, but with access to our equipment and resources when needed. The offer was everything Sierra had dreamed of and more. Financial security for her family, respect for her skills, and the chance to prove that automotive repair could be both profitable and ethical. There's one condition, she said. Name it. No more lies. No more tests. No more pretending to be someone you're not. If we're going to do this, we do it with complete honesty. Jason extended his hand. Deal. Though I should warn you, the real me is probably going to ask you out to dinner once we get through all the legal proceedings. Sierra felt warmth spread through her chest as she shook his hand. The real me might say yes, but you'll have to ask properly this time. 3 months later, Sierra stood in the newly renovated Carter's Auto Repair, watching her father beam with pride as he showed off the updated equipment to longtime customers. The old neighborhood garage had been transformed while keeping its heart, honest work at fair prices, with the added benefit of state-of-the-art diagnostic equipment and training. Jason approached, carrying 2 cups of coffee from the new break room. Your father's been telling Mrs. Peterson about the advanced brake testing equipment for 20 minutes. I think she's planning to bring her Buick in just to see the computer screens. Sierra laughed, accepting the coffee. He's like a kid with new toys. Thank you for this, Jason. All of it. Thank you for stopping that day on the highway. And for having the courage to do what was right even when it was hard. They stood together, watching Sierra's father and little brother Marcus, whose tuition was now current thanks to Sierra's new salary, demonstrate the hydraulic lift to fascinated neighborhood kids. You know what I realized? Sierra said. That day when I fixed your tire, I thought I was just helping someone in trouble. I had no idea I was fixing something much bigger. Jason moved closer, and Sierra didn't step away. What do you mean? I didn't just fix your tire that day, she said, echoing words he'd spoken weeks earlier. I helped you remember who you wanted to be. And you helped me discover who I could become. Jason's smile was soft, genuine, and completely real. So what happens now? Sierra looked around at the bustling garage, at her family's restored dreams, at the man who trusted her enough to risk everything on her integrity. Now we build something new. Together. As the autumn sun set through the garage windows, casting long shadows across the spotless floor, Sierra Carter realized that sometimes the best things in life started with a simple act of kindness on the side of the road. You just had to be brave enough to stop and help when someone needed it most. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, they'd help you in return.